Welcome to Alaska Weather, a production of Alaska Public Media and the National Weather Service, Alaska Region. Produced and broadcast daily from the studios of KAKM, Alaska Weather provides complete forecasts, public, marine, and aviation for all of Alaska. Alaska Weather is made possible by the following sponsors.
Find a living in fisheries. The UAS Fisheries Technology Program offers online study from anywhere in Alaska, plus labs and workshops in many Alaska towns.
Is most likely a chum.
Find your living without leaving where you are. Fisheries Technology from UAS.
If subsistence hunting, trapping, and fishing are important to you, please consider applying for one of the open seats on your Federal Subsistence Regional Advisory Council. These seats will be filled by rural Alaskans who are knowledgeable about fish and wildlife subsistence in their region. Apply by Friday, January 29th, 2016. Information at 1-800-478-1456 or email subsistence@fws.gov.
The National Weather Service.
Good evening, I'm David Kramer here with your Alaska weather. As always, please visit our website at arh.noaa.gov. Get any updates to the forecast, check out any watches, warnings, or advisories that we have out. You can also call our weather info line 1-800-472-0391. Get updates to that means as well. And you can follow us on Facebook, Twitter, and on YouTube. Taking a look now, we'll look at the advisories that we have out all up north and all throughout the Brooks Range. So we have wind advisories out, or wind chill advisories rather, out for all the areas of the Brooks Range, north and south, all going to around noon tomorrow. And those are going to bring wind chills down to minus 40 degrees. So again, that's all of the Brooks Range. Now in the southern portions of the Brooks Range, we also have blowing snow advisory out there. So that could drop visibilities down to 1/2 mile or less with some stronger winds getting up to around 25 miles per hour or higher. And again, that's all of those southern areas. So all of the areas around the Brooks Range all have wind chill advisories in that southern portion, also with blowing snow advisories. And then as we get down to the Bering Strait, down to St. Lawrence Island, blowing snow advisory for that area as well. And that's going to last until about 6 p.m. tomorrow evening. And the one exception to the noon time frame for the Brooks Range area is in the very southwestern portion of the area. That could also go out until 6 p.m. tomorrow evening. All of the other ones, again, are out until noon tomorrow. Taking a look now at our satellite imagery, you can see this band of area of lower pressure extending across the Bering Sea down through the Alaska Peninsula. And as we watch the satellite loop, you can start to see a lot of different low centers spinning up on this area. So we'll watch that now, and you can see one of our areas to the southeast of Sandpoint. We have another one up there, more the central part of the Bering, and one way out to the west. And as we watch again, you'll also see kind of to the south of that area, the westerly flow bringing in a lot more of the convective activity, which did produce some thunderstorms in the morning hours, but that has since tapered off and not expected anymore in the evening hours, but there is the slight chance of having some of those isolated cells pop up in some of this more enhanced queue. And as we look out over towards the east, we have another area of low pressure really starting to diminish now in the eastern part of the Gulf, and that's bringing in some light areas of snow and rain to places around the Panhandle. And then as we watch out over the mainland part of the state, you can see the darker color indicating some of those lower clouds, a lot of stratus, especially in the lower lying areas, and that's extending up all the way along the Arctic coastline. So now as we look at our weather for the remainder of the day, those lower clouds come into play here as we see a lot of snow along the Arctic coastline, the western part of the state, and way out to the west of the interior towards the McGrath area. Just going to be some light snow and flurries with that lower stratus, not expecting much, if any, accumulation at all, and that's going to be a continual theme as we look out for the next couple days for the interior and places further to the north and west. But we do have that blowing snow again through the Bering Strait area, all throughout the southern part of the Brooks Range as well. We have our low down in the southeast part of the state, bringing in some snow to eastern parts of Prince William Sound, extending towards Yakutat area, but switching over to rain as we get into the Panhandle, pushing down further to the south. As we look at that main band of low pressure, we have snow throughout much of the Bering Sea, some stronger areas of convection there, some more snow showers for a lot of the Aleutian Islands, but still here with some of that southerly push, seeing some more of that snow transition over to rain on the southern areas around the Alaska Peninsula and then out over the Gulf as well. Taking us into tonight, we are going to continue to see that westerly flow bringing in snow showers throughout the Bering Sea and Aleutian Islands. And we are going to have some fog lingering around and some more developing for Bristol Bay area, Kuskokwim Delta, but all along the western coast of the state, along the Arctic coastline and down through much of the central and eastern parts of the interior. Those lower clouds bringing in some of those light flurries. Again, not a lot of accumulation expected with that. Should remain pretty light. And as we look down into the Gulf of Alaska, low pressure pushing in, bringing in some of that warm air from the south. We are seeing some of the snow transition over to rain in southern portions of the Panhandle. But as we get closer to Prince William Sound, should be all snow there with some areas getting up into the eastern parts of the Alaska Range, extending closer towards McGrath there. So going to see some snow there as well tonight. For Tuesday, our one system in the Gulf pushing off towards the east, but still bringing in that rain and snow mix to much of the Panhandle area. The colder air starting to get a little bit further south now in the Haines and Skagway area for Yakutat as well, and then eastern parts of Prince William Sound. Still going to see the light flurry potential throughout much of the interior. At the Brooks Range, going to lighten up, but those lower clouds on the Arctic coastline going to bring in some of those light flurries as well. And going to continue to see those blowing snow conditions, especially until 6 p.m. with the strongest stuff out there by Bering Strait, St. Lawrence Island, and going to see some of those blowing snow conditions continuing in the southern areas of the Brooks Range through about noon. As we move down into the Bering Sea, we do have low pressure out there bringing in continued snow showers for that area. And if we look way down to the south, we can see the next system that's going to move in on Wednesday. But as we move towards the Bristol Bay area, seeing some snow and fog lingering around through much of Tuesday as well. And now that next big system coming up, a nice warm push with that as it's pushing out those snow conditions, bringing in some more rain for the central Aleutian Islands, eastern Aleutian Islands as well, starting to make its way into the Bering Sea. But that more northerly flow on the western side of that low, going to continue to see snow for the western Aleutian Islands. Much of the state, as we move into Wednesday, not going to see any heavy snow, but there is a slight chance for some light snow showers through central and eastern parts of the interior, down near McGrath, and up on the eastern parts of the Arctic coastline. And even though we have no new snow falling for the St. Lawrence Island, Bering Strait area, there is the potential for some of the snow already on the ground to continue to become blowing snow through those areas. As we look way out to the east, we do have our low pressure out over the eastern Bering really starting to diminish now, but still enough to bring some showers, especially in those more northern areas, becoming more snow, and the rain part of it is starting to move off to the south as those low pressures start to diminish. As we look for temperatures as of 2 p.m. this afternoon, in the mid to upper 30s for many places in the Panhandle, colder there by Skagway, 30 degrees. As we move out along the North Gulf Coast, right about freezing right along the coastline, but quickly dropping into the 20s as we move inland. 21 there at Valdez, and down into the single digits for interior locations, down to -7 at Glen Allen. Let's look out into the interior, anywhere from below 10 to above 10. And then as we move towards the Brooks Range, dropping down into the minus teens, and coldest there at Arctic Village, -26 this afternoon. Negative teens along the Arctic coastline as well. Kaktovik a little bit warmer, only -4 there. Then down in the Kotzebue Sound area, right around 0. And then as we get down into the Northern Sound area, into the teens above 0. Down in the southwestern part of the state, single digits along the YK Delta coastline. But as you get closer to Bethel, 14 degrees there. Teens interior parts of Bristol Bay in the mid-20s as we get further to the southwest. And then as we get in the Alaska Peninsula and down to the Aleutian Islands, above freezing there in the mid-30s, until we get out by Adak, dropping down to around 30 there, and then 26 degrees for Shemya. As we look for our lows tonight, not a lot of change, but a lot of the places that were above freezing in the Aleutians and Alaska Peninsula now going to be below freezing or at freezing for Sand Point there at 32 degrees. Then into the teens for Bristol Bay, into the single digits For the YK Delta area, AKwx staying there at 17 degrees, just below zero for the Norton Sound area, getting down to around -20 as we get into the Kotzebue Sound area, and then -20s for much of the Arctic coastline, with Dead Horse staying a little bit colder there, -30 for tonight. And down in the -20s for much of the Brooks Range, -teens as we get into the interior part of the state. South Central staying in the positive single digits with 20s along the North Gulf Coast. Kodiak there getting down to 29 degrees, and then getting down to the mid-30s for the Panhandle area, with some places like Yakutat getting just below freezing at 31 degrees. Highs for tomorrow, not a whole lot of change really, only just a couple degrees of increase for the Panhandle into the mid-30s for many locations. Similarly, for the South Central area, not a whole lot of change, staying around the 20s along the Gulf coastline, getting into the teens in more interior locations. Glen Allen only getting up to around 1 degree. Into the interior part of the state, staying below zero for the most part, with negative teens as we get into the Brooks Range, and then getting down to as low as -24 or up to as high as -24 for Dead Horse tomorrow. Staying well below zero for the Kotzebue Sound area as well, -teens, and then right around zero for highs tomorrow for the Norton Sound area, and then getting up to around 10 degrees for the YK Delta and into the mid-20s for the Bristol Bay area, and then just above freezing all the way along the Aleutian Islands, with St. Paul getting up to 33 degrees for a high tomorrow. Our flying weather, we can see where that band of lower pressure is sitting right over the Bering Sea with those IFR conditions and MVFR conditions in other areas around the Bering Sea. And it's really important to note as we look for the main part of the state, a lot of the MVFR conditions are from the lower cloud ceilings. So we're seeing a lot of the MVFR conditions in the low-lying areas. But if you notice along the mountains where many of the passes are, should still remain VFR through much of the day. That includes the Brooks Range as well. But for Chilkoot and White, still expecting those MVFR conditions. So as we look through the passes, Anaktuvik should be VFR for tomorrow. Adigan Pass also should remain VFR. Lake Clark and Merrill starting off VFR, dropping down to MVFR throughout the day. Rainy Pass should be VFR for tomorrow, as well as windy. Isabel Pass should also remain VFR, and Mintasta Pass. Tanita Pass, VFR conditions expected. Portage, VFR as well. And then Chilkoot and White should remain marginal throughout the day tomorrow. Take a look now at our freezing levels. We do have a little bit of warm air coming up with those lows that we saw moving across the Gulf at 2,000 feet line there. And then our surface freezing line now south of mainland Alaska, extending out across the Bering Sea. If we look at our icing, starting off west for the central and eastern Aleutian Islands between 4,000 and 8,000 feet there. Along the southwest coastline down towards Kodiak between 1,000 and 5,000 feet. And as we look out for the south central, extending off to the west, we do have between 4,000 and 10,000 feet there. And then for the Panhandle area, we're seeing icing expected tomorrow between 5,000 and 10,000 feet. Taking a look at our jet stream, main part of the jet doesn't go over mainland Alaska, but just to the south of the Gulf of Alaska, westerly jet as high as 170 knots. And as we look further to the west, even though the main part of the jet, that 150 knot part, is well to the south, a branch of the jet does go out over the Aleutian Islands out of a westerly direction at about 125 knots. So we drop down to 9,000 feet, flow around our lows on the south side out of that westerly direction, getting as high as 40 to 45 knots over the central Aleutian Islands, and continuing that westerly flow over much of mainland Alaska down into the Gulf. Over the main part of the state, 10 to 15 knots for the most part, stronger as we get closer to the lower of that westerly direction, 20 knots there, circulating around the 20 knots, and on the western side, a little bit stronger, 30 knots there. So we move down our low over the southeast part of the state, 20 to 15 knots out of a westerly direction, with our strongest winds on the southern side of that low, getting up to as high as 50 knots. Down at 3,000 feet, we can still see that low there. Again, the strongest winds to the south of that low, around 55 knots, but dropping off as it circulates around the low, only around 20 knots as it actually makes it over the Panhandle area. Mainland Alaska seeing weak low pressure and also seeing weak winds associated with that until we get up along the Arctic coastline, easterly direction, 25 knots there. And then as we look down over the Gulf of Alaska, we have the 20 knot winds increasing out over the Gulf of Alaska, getting up to as high as 30 knots there. And as we move further to the south of Kodiak, getting up to 35 to 40 knots with the strongest winds staying to the south of the Aleutian Islands. And as we go even further south, we'd see those winds increase even more. But out over southern central parts of the Bering Sea, we have 30 to 35 knots out of that westerly direction. And then out over to the northern side of those lows, we have that easterly flow around 35 knots. As we look at these stronger winds going across the Aleutian Islands, as we move to our turbulence chart, then we can see where that's coming from. So way out from the western Aleutian Islands down into the eastern Aleutian Islands, seeing some light turbulence there. Not a whole lot of moderate expected below 3,000 feet. As we move into the Bristol Bay area around Kodiak Island, below 5,000 feet expected there. And a small area by Cape Lisburne and Point Hope, below 3,000 feet expected for that lighter turbulence for tomorrow. If you stay with us, we'll be back shortly with the marine forecast.
Good evening, I'm Harry Keeling, and on behalf of Alaska Public Media and the Alaskan Aviation Safety Foundation, welcome to Hangar Flying. Our guest this evening is Shelley Hughes, who's in her third year representing the Palmer area. Representative Hughes has lived all over the state, from the southeast to the interior. She's lived in Palmer for 25 years and has 4 children. Like so many Alaskans, Shelley feels a special connection to aircraft and aviation. One of the special reasons she's on our program today is because she has become very involved with unmanned aircraft. She has a very important safety message out there for you parents, children, or adults that may have a model or drone under your Christmas tree. One source says 400,000. Another source says as many as 1 million drones under Christmas trees. That's concerning. That's why Representative Hughes is with us tonight. Shelley, welcome.
Thank you, Harry. I'm happy to be here, and thank you for inviting me.
How did you get interested in drones?
Well, I think all Alaskans realize the importance of aviation in our state, and I've lived in places where I had to rely totally on aviation to get in and out. And as far as drones, a couple years ago, constituents came to me concerned about them as far as Big Brother spying, that kind of thing. A lot of those fears have been relieved. We have passed legislation to ensure that warrants would be required as far as law enforcement use. But I continue to look at it as an opportunity for Alaska if we can figure out how to use this tool wisely and keeping the public safe and keeping privacy protected for Alaskans. And so I have passed legislation to establish a task force that has been looking at the policy for 3 years. And I'm happy to say we're a leader in the state in that regard. And one of our emphasis last year was safety, on how and where it's safe to fly, appropriate use. And this year we've added the privacy concern to that conversation. And here with, like you said, as many as 1 million drones flying off the shelf, and that pun is intended.
Wow. Can we start with the safety piece? You're talking to people all over the state that may have these under the Christmas tree.
Exactly.
Tell them how to fly them or how not to fly them.
I would be happy to do that. First, before I do, I want to point everyone that if you want to see the complete list of guidelines, go to alaskadrones.org. But some of the key ones that before your son or daughter, or maybe even you, get out and use a drone, remember to stay under 400 feet. Don't fly within 5 miles of an airport unless you've contacted the airport and gotten clearance. Don't fly over people. Stay at least 25 feet away from a person or any kind of a property that you could damage. You know, sometimes, Harry, the batteries will go out or the user could accidentally lose control. And we don't want one of those coming down and hurting anyone or anything. And so staying under 400 feet, away from airports, also away from traffic and roadways. A distraction on the roadways could cause an automobile accident. And so we feel it is important for us to be getting the word out now that we're going to have so many new users. And we want folks to have a great time, have fun, enjoy their equipment, but we want them to know how to use it appropriately.
Shelley, thank you for that. That's a very good summary of the things that people need to keep in mind. And it's really not a toy. I mean, it's for your enjoyment, but you can be hurt by it. I mean, the props themselves, if they're hard plastic, a lot of the injuries that drones have caused to people are cuts from the propellers, but like you say, it could fall on a person. That's why you don't fly over people, and all of the other safety precautions. Thank you for sharing that. I want to get you on again, actually on Christmas Day, to reiterate the message, talk a little bit about your legislative task force, but you've got a guideline, a book there that's very, very well done. I want you to show that to our audience.
Yes, and actually this is available through the alaskadrones.org website, and if you go into a retailer that is selling drones, we're also providing these bookmarks with that website for consumers, but you can download this directly at alaskadrones.org. It's a great book with great illustrations, as you can see, has the guidelines for safety and privacy protection, and also includes some frequently asked questions. One of those questions, can I shoot down a drone? And the answer is no.
Thank you. Shelley, thanks for being on the program tonight, and I appreciate the fact that you're going to come back on Christmas and reiterate the message. And we want to talk about two things then, the legislative task force and also the privacy concerns.
Well, thank you, Harry. And I want to mention too, just like we want to keep people safe on the ground, we want to keep them safe and we don't want a drone hitting a manned aircraft with passengers inside as well.
Thank you. Ladies and gentlemen, I can't emphasize or re-emphasize that enough. If you fly above 400 feet, or near an airport, you are risking people's lives. If that drone of yours goes in a jet engine, it very well may take it out. If it hits a windshield, it very well may blind the pilot. Please, please be careful. And until next time, tune in, and until next time, fly safe.
Welcome back. We'll take a quick look now at the ice edge. We do have some ice now extending down around Nunavik Island, and with the colder temperatures and winds that we are expecting, we do expect that ice to push off even more to the west, with some lighter ice now pushing into Bristol Bay as well. And then in the Cook Inlet area, we are expecting ice growth with the colder temperatures in northern Cook Inlet. Not expecting those to get past Calgon Island, however. Taking a look now for the main marine forecast for the southeastern part of the state. Southeasterly flow 15 to 20 knots. Seas in the inside waters 3 to 4 feet, and getting up to as high as 13 feet in eastern parts of the Gulf. For Wednesday, continuing to see some of the southeast flow in the inside waters, 20 knots there, but as we get north of Juneau, we are expecting northerly flow, 20 knots. And then out over much of the Gulf, seeing more northerly component, getting as high as 25 knots there, until we get up by Yakutat easterly direction. Seas now getting up to as high as 18 feet in the Gulf of Alaska. On Tuesday for the south central, primarily somewhat westerly flow, maybe a little bit northerly component to that. Lighter winds further to the north, getting stronger as we get closer to Kodiak Island, as high as 35 knots there out of a northwesterly direction. And there's the potential for some freezing spray as we look out over areas west of the Barren Islands towards Augustine. As we look out for Wednesday, we do have more westerly flow picking up a little bit here, 20 to 30 knots for the most part, with areas to the east of the Barrens getting a little bit stronger there, as high as 35 knots, with seas out over the Gulf 9 to 12 feet, strongest to the south, and then getting up into Cook Inlet only 2 to 4 feet there. Along the Alaska Peninsula, westerly flow 30 to 40 knots, with freezing spray conditions on the Bering side of the peninsula there, and then seas as high as 13 to 19 feet on the Pacific side. For Wednesday, continuing with that mostly westerly flow, 25 to 30 knots there, with seas strongest on the Pacific side, 13 to 14 feet. For the Aleutian Islands, primarily a west or southwest flow, 25 to 30 knots for the most part, until we get way out there by Shimia, southwesterly flow around 40 knots, with the highest seas there as well, up to as high as 20 feet. Then on Wednesday, continuing to see the strongest winds out west, northeasterly flow by the western Aleutian Islands, 50 knots there. But all the other areas going to see that more southerly component to the flow, 35 to 50 knots, still strongest as we get further to the west, with the highest seas on the Pacific side getting up to as high as 29 feet and as low as 15 feet as we get to the north of Dutch Harbor area. As we look along the west coast of this state, more or less a northerly component to the flow, 20 to 35 knots, with a lot of freezing spray conditions, even in the southwesterly flow by the Pribilof Islands, seeing those freezing spray conditions on Tuesday. But as we move into Wednesday with the northerly flow, we're going to continue to see freezing spray, but starting to warm up by the Pribilof Islands with that southerly flow around 35 knots there. And then out by St. Matthew, we are going to see northeasterly flow around 40 knots on Wednesday. Along the Arctic coastline, primarily a northerly flow until we get out there by AKwx, westerly flow there, 10 knots with our strongest flow on the western side of the area, up to as high as 25 knots out of that northerly direction. Then on Wednesday, staying out of the north, 10 to 20 knots until we get out to the east in the Beaufort Sea, westerly direction there, 10 to 15 knots on Wednesday. Quick recap for the state. We do have low pressure bringing in some warmer air to the southeast part of the state, a mix of rain and snow, becoming more rain as we get further to the south. Until we get to the Prince William Sound area, you're going to see a lot more snow there. And they continue up into the interior, light flurries for central and eastern parts of the interior, continuing along the Arctic coastline as well. And then throughout all of the Brooks Range tonight through about noon tomorrow, we are going to see wind chill advisories on both sides of the Brooks Range. On the southern side of the Brooks Range, we are going to also see blowing snow conditions, could drop visibilities down to a half mile or less. And as we get down to the Bering Strait, St. Lawrence Island area, blowing snow conditions existing there as well, and that could last until 6 p.m. tomorrow. And otherwise, we have some snow showers in the Norton Sound area continuing down the western part of the state and out through the Bering Sea and Aleutian Islands, with some fog out there by the Kuskokwim Delta and Bristol Bay areas. Then into tomorrow, continuing to see the snow showers in the Bering Sea, Aleutian Islands. We have another warmer system coming up from the south, going to bring in a lot more rain and snow with that. Then as we look out over much of the interior, some light flurries throughout much of the state, along the Arctic coastline as well, continuing to see some blowing snow conditions on Tuesday through the Bering Strait, St. Lawrence Island. Then a rain and snow mix in the Panhandle, warmer to the south, becoming snow as we get closer towards Prince William Sound as those lows start to dissipate. For Alaska Weather, I'm David Kramer. Thanks for being with us.
These forecasts are to be used for planning purposes only. Call 1-800-WX-BRIEF for a formal pre-flight briefing. Always file a flight plan before you go flying. The U.S. Coast Guard Auxiliary urges you to leave a float plan with a friend or the harbor master before you go boating. Alaska Weather is made possible by the following sponsors.
The National Weather Service.
If you're a rural Alaskan resident, consider applying for a seat on one of the Federal Subsistence Regional Advisory Councils by Friday, January 29, 2016. Applicants who have knowledge of the regional subsistence uses, customs, and traditions are needed. Council meetings serve as a forum for regional public involvement in subsistence management. Information at 1-800-478-1456 or email subsistence@fws.gov.